Thanks for coming out on this cold and dreary evening for what I'm calling More Music for Heavy Listening. About last year sometime, I gave a recital called Music for Heavy Listening, so this is More Music for Heavy Listening. And by heavy listening, I mean I want the audience to sort of be following everything that's going on in the music as well as you can. And I want to do everything I can to assist you in doing that. So that's why we have these color-coded scores up here. My feeling is the more you can follow what's going on and know when the piece is coming to its halfway point and knowing when we're leading into an important moment, that that kind of engaged listening is going to give you a much more intense, emotional, and delightful experience. So, welcome to the Well-Tempered Clavier. This is the second book of the Well-Tempered Clavier, and I'm going through it from the beginning. So last year I did C and C sharp major and minor preludes and fugues. So tonight we are ascending to D major, E flat major, and the strange key of D sharp minor. And each of these pieces has such a wonderful, unique, and amazingly inventive approach to the way music is put together. And as a composer, I'm just delighted by that, and I would think it'd be a shame if I didn't share some of these things that Bach is doing with you. So, it's not so important to read notes. In fact, I assume you probably can't see the notes. I wouldn't want you to try to perform from what you're seeing. But what you can see, I hope, is patterns that are indicated by these boxes that I've drawn, sometimes little swatches of color. And this D major prelude, well, it's a great way to start. In fact, I swore I wasn't going to do too much talking before you get to hear some music. So here's the way it begins. Here's the first red box. So there's this fanfare that has a run of 16th notes and another trumpet call arpeggio that's in triple time. And then it's answered occasionally by these big red swatches, which are duple time. So I think that's a pretty easy thing to recognize. This fanfare, the 16th notes, and the swatches of duple. So you can see that that comes 3 times in the piece. 2 times are marked in heavy red, and 1 time is marked with a lighter red because it's upside down. So we get to see a little bit of a form, that something comes, its upside down version is heard, and then finally it comes back at the end, right side up, changed a little bit. And another thing that needs to be known is that there is a double bar here. So this big red blotch and this big red block are indicating repeat marks. So basically you're going to hear all of this, and then it's going to be repeated, and then you're going to hear all of this, and then that is repeated. So the form is sort of A, B, A, or sorry, rather A, and then A, B, A. So what's really wonderful about this piece is how Bach uses breaking up the material into little fragments to signify what kind of thing it is. So certain kinds of material is used to begin things, certain kinds of material is used to end things. And here we have these big 2-bar phrases that begin the piece and show up at these important moments. But there's also, these little tan sections, a shorter form of it. It's only 1 measure long, so it goes up for 1 measure and comes back down. Now, what you might be able to see now is that we have a red, and then we have this tan, and then we have the red, and then we have this tan. And that might lead you to suspect something that is true, that the entire first part of the piece is pretty much copy and pasted at the end of the piece, but with these wonderful little variations to it. So that's sort of the joy of having these repeats, these long sections that repeat. One of the things is that this first part ends in a dominant key. It's the wrong key, and this has to be adjusted to make it end in the right key. Let's look a little bit more about how this piece, this little bit of material is broken up so that I think you can follow the difference between the red box and the blue box and the yellow box. We talked about the red box and the brown box. The blue box is only now half a measure long. So we'll see that every time you see the blue box, that's half a measure presentation of the idea. And then it gets even shorter. So the yellow box is just a 1 beat long idea. The 16th notes are now coming in fast succession. And that comes back in this yellow section. And finally, there is this green section, which is all falling down. So you can hear the music getting in shorter segments as it leads to this big cadence. On the subject of cadence, there's a stopping point in music that we call cadence, and that's a sort of a punctuation, a period. It might not end the entire paragraph, but it certainly ends a sentence. So here you're going to hear something that sounds like the end of the section. You could very easily end there. But Bach always has something more to sort of give us. So there's a coda at the end of this, which is the green material. And of course, that's going to come here. So that's the whole structure of the main section of the piece, which is replicated at the end of the piece. So when you have a section of thing like this, and you've used your software to make a copy and a paste, the big issue then is, what do I do to get back to this? And what do I do in between these two big pillars of musical form? And that could be maybe the most interesting thing. So Bach gives us, as I mentioned, the upside down version here, another kind of version of the blue. So it's sort of like replicating the way the piece begins. But then it wanders off into these runs of 16th notes, this section. So when you see these big green swatches, that is a running 16th note passage. And I would like to take a really little close look at what leads us into this thing, because as a composer, what I'm fascinated by and problemed by when I'm writing my own music is, how do you make something feel like it's not so important in itself, but important because of where it's going. And that's what's going on in this entire section, from this B minor cadence to the return. So I'll play a little bit of this B minor cadence, and then you'll see that it starts to do this green material like it's the coda we had before, but then the left hand goes crazy. And we have 4 measures of left hand craziness, and it gets even crazier because in this purple section we have the minor key. So it's really furrowed brow, heavy duty minor key music that finally leads to one of these green swatches, except this green swatch covers 3/4 of the keyboard. So I'd like you to hear that once, and then we'll leave that for the performance to hear the whole thing put together. But here is this section, and see how wonderfully it leads to this return of the great D major fanfare. cadence, and then a little coda. But it's a fake coda, because now it's going to take off into the left hand going crazy. There's your B flat. To take off with the final section of the piece. So it's a music that's definitely engineered to play with your emotions. And I think if you're hearing all these things the way I think Bach was imagining them, it's such a powerful time experience. And it's really articulating time in a way that I think should give you, make your pulse run, make your hair stand on end when something strange happens. So I'm looking for those kind of feelings in music and examining how Bach does that. So this is the fugue that goes along with that. So short definition, a fugue is a piece that's all built around a subject that is, and it's polyphonic, it's multi-voices, and that subject is going to keep appearing in each of the voices at various times in the piece. And the entire structure is now not built around these blocks of material, but around a line that keeps continuing but being exchanged through a different kind of voices. And here is the subject. And it's repeated in the alto. And the soprano comes in. Before the soprano ends, the bass comes in. So those are the red boxes. You can always recognize them because they always start with 3 repeated notes. And anytime you see a red box, you're going to see 3 repeated notes. And you're, without even looking at it, you're always going to be able to hear these 3 repeated notes coming in with entrances of different voices in different places. So that's one way to sort of look at the fugue, is just a series of these entrances that are sort of scattered throughout the piece. But there's other things that come into play. One is, what is the other stuff that we hear besides the red boxes? And sometimes there's a lot of different kinds of material, counter material that's composed to fit against the subject, episodes that are meant to sort of fill the space in between subjects. But here, and I think this is a pretty special situation, that all of the material in between subject statements is simply generated from the end of the theme, end of the subject. In fact, the material that accompanies the subject, which we would call a counter subject in normal terms, is not really so much a counter subject because it's the same thing we've seen all around. So every time you see that's green, how many times can you play without getting really boring? Well, obviously quite a few, because Bach knows how to keep it from being really boring because of the way he structures these things. One of the elements of the structure is cadences. I mentioned cadence in the prelude. And here, these big black boxes, which I apologize for their ugliness, but I wanted to make sure that you could see them, are places where the music actually stops and the subject and the counter subject stop. And it really just gives a chance for us to get a breath. The beautiful example of that is right here. You can see instead of having the lines moving in different directions, they're moving together in parallel harmony and become something that's harmonic rather than polyphonic. Those gorgeous chords moving all together, but they lose their independence at that point and they become part of coagulated unit. So you'll see a lot of that happening at these purple points, and they're always cadencing in different keys. And I think every time you see a black thing, if you can really follow along, you'll feel that the music is really stopping. Of course, the very ending is one place where the music is going to stop. So that's a great cadence. The wrinkle in that is that you have almost exactly the same material here, a line too early. Should be the end. But look what happens. He throws in this crazy version of the subject. So at this point, sounds like the piece is all ready to end. We have these nice green swatches that are leading us to cadence. And suddenly a lot of minor key elements come in. So we get a deceptive cadence, which means the piece has to continue. Well, what does it continue with? It continues with the subject. And if we look at the subject as it's appearing in these red boxes, and I can blow this up a little bit, that you can see they start getting closer and closer together. Here, they're 2 beats apart. Here, they're 2 beats apart. Here, now they're 1 beat apart, so they're getting closer and closer together. And here, they're all on the same pitch of A. He has to abandon the alto because it didn't work out very well. But here, they all come in on different pitches, a beat apart. And then at this great moment after this strange deceptive cadence, they all come in a beat apart, and this time a third lower. So it's, I like the sense that it loses all sense of it being a subject and just a series of voices that are crashing into each other and coming in on top of each other. The effect, I think, is kind of like some sort of tintinnabulation. It's so you could say that's the climax of the piece. But I say you could say because there's one other thing I want to talk about, and that's this green material, which can be extended on top of itself and used in a canon. And you'll see that green material gets a large amount of play in the periods before cadences, and then the subjects, the red boxes, come in. But there's one place where the green material, and I made it in a dark green box to show the extended version of it, leads to a big scale in the bass. So I hope you can hear that when it comes, because it's a fabulous moment. We first have the little green material in canon with itself an extension. And the heavens open up. It reminds me of the Sanctus from the B minor Mass. And then the tenor gets its chance to sing the main subject in full glory, and that leads us to this little development that we've talked about, how the piece ends. So I've talked a lot about this. So I hope many of these things are things you can pick up on, or you can just close your eyes and feel how all of this music is taking little strands of material and keeping it always alive by moving into different keys, moving parts of the keyboard, and different kinds of articulations of time through cadence and through sequencing. So let me get this back to its state. So here is the D major Prelude and Fugue. Thank you. Thank you. So now we are in the parallel minor key of D minor. And this is a much different kind of structure from what we saw with D major. You can see that there is a sort of red box, and it does come back. And that's about it, because this is much more of a free fantasy, a free toccata kind of piece. And the little bits of material that come back seem to be placed rather sporadically. And it sort of allows the piece to take on this through composed quality. So you're not going to have to listen as hard to find things that are being repeated, but you just can enjoy the glory of the moment. It's kind of a live for the moment kind of form. There are some things that are structurally able to be captured and enjoyed. One of the things is it's the use of voice exchange, so that here the red box is over the brown box, and then it repeats with the red box in the bass and the brown box in the soprano. Thing is going on here. If I play just the red boxes, they sound like this. Or if I play just the yellow boxes, they sound like this. We put that together and it sounds like this. I kept going because the same sort of throwing things back and forth takes place in this section. But these are just sort of momentary happenstances. It's nothing they're supposed to lock onto and expect to come back in the piece, because it doesn't. One thing that sort of comes back in the piece is this sewing machine sound. And that's created by the right hand playing while the left hand is playing over it. And that thing sort of comes back. It's this wonderful sound. I think he just enjoyed the noise of the harpsichord rumbling away on that machine-like figure. A few things your ears should be able to capture and sort of let you know that you've come to a certain turning point in the piece. One is this purple material that is a chromatic, almost totally chromatic scale. So that's a pretty big moment. And as he's getting close to the end of the piece, he, pardon me, includes this cadenza-like thing. I made it in red because I think it feels like suddenly we're no longer having these two-voice kind of closely regulated material, but rather something that's very free and cadenzas-like. It's like he's improvising it on the spot. Before leading to the ending with its the little sewing machine material comes back. So that's the D minor prelude. This fugue is very different from the D major fugue we looked at. One thing is the D major fugue could have been sung by a chorus. I was going to mention that I fell in love with that piece back in the 60s when the Swingle Singers were singing it. So that D major fugue has that sort of choral feeling to it. I guess the Swingle Singers could sing this, but it would sound pretty virtuosic rather than choral, because it's a very instrumental kind of idea, this triplet sixteenths, followed by chromatic eighth notes. So we have very fast notes. These are like 6 times as fast as those are. And then there's one other idea, is regular duple 16th notes. So the subject is heard in the soprano, rather in the alto, and then the soprano comes in, imitates it. So you'll hear that subject twice, but when it continues, you'll hear the duple red material coming in the alto. Now here you'll notice that the 16ths come, but they're upside down. And this is a little codetta material that's stuck in between the entrances of the subject, and it uses what I put in blue is the upside down version of the 16th note triplets. And then the subject comes in the bass, so you'll get to hear that. Now, there's something that happens. I'll start that one more time, but this time, notice that there is this new idea, this yellow idea, which seems like it's just sort of stuck in the middle and not very important. As you look at the rest of the piece, you'll see that the yellow kind of takes over and everything else disappears in this section of the piece. But just for now, let me play this bass entrance of the subject, followed by the little yellow imitative music. So it comes 4 times there, but then it comes 8 times in a row over in this section. Another interesting thing about this fugue is how the little subject, the fast exploding 16th note triplets, are placed on top of each other when you have this idea of stretto, when the subject is placed on top of itself. And there's a great example of this in this line here, where the alto is followed by the soprano. And then you'll hear the little counter subject coming in the bass. And that takes us to this point where we have the same situation, except it's the upside down subject that is being echoed by the bass. If you can hear that this is upside down, and the chromatic scale that used to come down. So that's a great moment, and it's even greater because it's in imitation 1 beat later in the bass. So you get to see lots of instances of things getting started. Many times the subject really kind of starts and stops before it ever gets to its little 8th note chromatic scale. And one of the really great things I admire about Bach is how his sense of timing led him to create sections like this one, where you can see these little blue boxes. And the blue boxes are cooled down version, no chromaticism, and very playful versions of the upside down theme. But at the end of that, we get something that's sort of like the theme, but it's actually a more intense chromatic version of it, and then the right side up version comes in the soprano. So these kind of things are scattered all the way through, and that's what these boxes are indicating. At the very end of the piece, we finally hear that red, this thing coming in the bass in its very lowest range, something that we hadn't heard for a whole page. And when it finally comes, it brings the piece to a very strong ending. Maybe playing the last line would be something for you to hear, and then we'll go back and play the whole piece. So that's how this wonderful set of D minor Prelude and Fugue ends. And here's the collection. Thank you. So we go up a half step, and we're in the key of E flat major. And this is one of the most beautiful, sunny, sweet, lovable pieces, I think, in the whole collection. Key of E flat major sort of lends itself to that kind of good-natured feeling. But I also think that the most important thing is the meter of 9/8. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Another thing that gives it this sense of sunniness and openness are all the rest. And I'd like to blow this up a little bit so you can maybe see a little bit better when the piece begins. So you see an awful lot of rests. Rests in between statements of the right hand melody, rests in the bass that give it almost a jazz bass feeling to it. So that's the main tune of the piece. And it comes back at the end. And what you can see here, it comes but as it continues, that little yellow thing that only happened once at the beginning turns into a sequence of 4 times. But what I love about this is the bass that goes. So that's a little sort of happy-go-lucky wandering bass line. So this whole section sounds like that. Actually, I would like to play for you leading into that, because the way he sets up this recapitulation, I mentioned before how fascinated I am by how composers lead you into the return of the material. You sort of know that it's coming, but you have to wait for it in a way and enjoy that lead up to it. So we're heading for this statement, but he gets to it by going with this repetition of this line, but every time a step higher, and that leads us to the but there's one more thing I want to show you before I play this little section, and that's that right before it makes this lead in, and you remember the same thing happened in the D major prelude, how there's suddenly a minorish kind of feeling. Things go on the dark side. So here, these are borrowed from the minor key in the flat side of the spectrum. And that sets up this pedal tone, which finally leads us to the return of the theme. So I want to play for you all of this little dark stuff leading to the pedal tone with the scale going up. And finally, the tune comes. And when it comes, it's celebrated with this extra lumpy bass line added to it. Great rest just to have that last line all by itself, falling down into the ending. There's 2 other little sweet moments in here that I just would like you to hear once before you hear the whole thing in context. There's this wonderful C minor, really plaintive idea. I marked that with a blue box, and it comes back towards the end of the piece. But this time it's in the key of G minor and goes up to the very top of Bach's keyboard range. That's just that little moment where instead of going up, it goes down. My heart always goes at that point. There's another really, really funny moment, and that's this purple bass music. I think I need to make my screen just a little bit smaller so you can see all of it. Come on, guys. Yep. So this line goes like this. This is the purple, which is pretty funny. And then he repeats it. But if that's not funny enough, he repeats it, but this time it's upside down, so the skips are 9s. And then another one. So that section sounds like this. So that's some of the silliest music I think Bach ever wrote, and I just love it. And the fugue that goes along with that is also pretty good-natured, fun music. The tune has a lot of syncopated skips in it. Alto comes in and does the exact same thing, and the soprano comes in. You'll notice that this is really square. Unlike a lot of the fugues, there's not any extra material that's sort of added to make it a little more elegant. It's just straightforward. Here's the tune, and now the alto has a tune, now soprano has a tune, and then now, well, it starts like goes bass, tenor, alto, soprano, just straight up the charts. And then the tune can be used in imitation with itself. So here the tenor has the tune and the bass follows. And the alto and soprano say, okay, let's try that. And that's actually how the whole piece ends, with the soprano followed by the bass. Here is. But there's one little development in the middle of it, and you remember in the D minor fugue, I had these little blue boxes to show sort of a place where it's a lighter moment that distracts us, sort of cleans the palette, takes us away from the tune. And this material, the blue and the yellow, do that. But in the middle of all that, the tenor comes in, and this. So you can hear that version of the tune is different from the other ones because it's going into the key of A flat. And when it comes in, it is accompanied by a bass which is doing all the wrong notes. So this is E flat and D flat, and the bass is doing D natural. Yeah, maybe I can blow that up. So you can, this is too cool a moment not to blow up. The tenor and the bass comes in with the other version of the harmonic melodic minor scale. Two other quick moments. One is talking about funky notes. There is this great cadence at the end of the exposition. So you remember in the D major fugue I said when the voices lose their independence and suddenly come together and moving in parallel chords, it represents a very strong departure from the texture of the piece and leads us to suspect something's afoot, which is a cadence. There's one other occasion with a dark note, and that's at the very end of the piece, where the last G that we hear in the melody before the last chord is played as a G flat. It's almost like he's thinking, well, I'm going to go to the next Prelude and Fugue, which is in E flat minor, so, or more likely, he just really thought the ending of the fugue had to have something a little bit special about it, and that certainly adds that particular color to it. So here is the E flat major Prelude and Fugue. So you would think that the parallel minor to E flat major would be E flat minor, which would be 6 flats. But Bach decided instead to write in D sharp minor. It's the same notes, but written as sharps, which means, since it's a minor key, we have lots of non-key signature notes that are many times written as double sharps. So you'll see some very interesting kinds of double sharps in this piece. And the tune, which does happen quite a bit, you'll see it in red boxes all the time, is this creepy crawling ascent followed by scale. Sometimes it gets chopped, or actually compressed into half its length. So if you have the creepy crawly for one measure, one beat, and the scale, that becomes a new part of the tune, which becomes really important as we're heading towards cadences and stopping. By the way, at this point, we have reached D double sharp diminished 7th chord, which has the most double sharps seen in a chord that I can think of. So that's a big moment. There is one little piece of material, this blue material, that sort of somehow grows almost unobtrusively out of the earlier material and then becomes its own thing. Before leading back to the red box material, the original material in the major key. So this piece, you'll see, is in the same repeat form that we saw with the D major prelude. It's a Baroque binary, which means there is a repeat of each section. So you basically have 2 sections, each of which are heard twice. And the second section starts with the tune. But what steals the show is this green flurry of material. And then the little blue box thing that comes, it's a sort of a juxtaposition, a real intrusion, I think, in the midst of this. And then we do the whole thing again with the red over the green, this time the flourish of materials in the left hand. And that material is only heard here, and then this little black box means it's a cadence. It's as if the whole piece is ending. And you'll notice we're using that compressed version, the brown box version, to lead to this cadence. And that could be the end of the piece. But then Bach realized, wait a minute, I haven't got enough mileage out of this wonderful green box material. So he brings it back 3 times to lead to the ending of the piece. The little blue thing is the actual cadence of the piece. It's what ends the piece, and it's different from anything else in the whole piece. And it happens twice. So I think you can recognize that when it comes, and I want to get right to the fugue. This subject starts out with 3 repeated notes, so it seems like it's going to be just like the D major fugue. But what happens after the 3 repeated notes is this winding, ascending line with a lot of notes that are not on the beat. So it's a 1 and 2 and 3. 1, 3, 4, 1. The nice thing about having those beats that aren't in the subject is you can fill them with the counter subject in this climbing line. So you'll be hearing that a lot of times in this first page of the fugue. And I want to sort of go right to the second page. And as you look at it, so the purple box, I thought this theme was so expressive that I gave it a special purple color. And you'll see that going through the different voices, coming with various counterpoint and using that little green winding upward counter subject throughout the first page of the piece. What I think you should listen for in the ending of the piece, the last third of it, is how initially you'll hear the subject in the soprano. With some of the most interesting chromatic chords that I've seen Bach use for a fugue harmonization. That brought us to this point where the alto has it, and I think you'll be able to recognize when you hear it in context something very, very different. It doesn't happen any other place in the piece where a line continues on in a bass line for these kind of running 16th notes. And you'll notice that the two, soprano and alto, are crossing over each other there. And then finally, this is the last big statement of the theme before the ending, and that's in the tenor harmonized. That's an augmented sixth chord that's very expressive when it's used in this context. So we're seeing lots of these purpley-eyed notes, which indicates some sort of really tortured chromaticism going on. And there's a long section without the subject that leads to this big moment that I think I have to set you up for. And that is these little purple things are diminished thirds, and they create a very expressive motion, especially when they are up high. So this section is built on that. You'll note I put this G clef in red, so you'd realize that all of this is going on here. The bottom sounding voice is way up high in the treble clef. So the entire sound of the spectrum, of the tonal spectrum, is up high, the top third of Bach's keyboard. And that is just to set up this final statement of the bass, which I think has to be added a 16-foot stop that makes it in octaves and leads to the end of the piece. So I want to play this moment for you, starting actually back here. See if you can follow with the easygoing stuff here, getting darker and darker, and then finally introducing these minor thirds. Actually, we should wait until I play the whole thing to hear that, but I do want to, I'll start right here where the minor thirds, diminished thirds are coming. Everybody's way up high, and there's that really expressive diminished third. Now we start rolling down. And then here comes the bass. one last little tidbit is that that sounds like the piece should have ended. But there's one thing Bach thought that would be cool that he hasn't used anywhere in the piece, is that the upside down version of the subject along with the right side up. So after we have this big cadence, there's still more. So that is what will bring us to the end of this set of D-sharp minor prelude and fugue.